Greetings! In today's videos, I've got an amazing guest. I am still like in goosebumps. In this guest here, she's been in business for around about 20 years. She has spoken to me. You are going to listen to it. You're going to be blown away because we spoke about business in the last 2 years. What happened? How could she have done it better? We spoke about parenting. We spoke about investing in different countries. We spoke about, she's also an author. She writes books. We spoke about her book. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've been waiting for that video to come out, it is here. Don't forget to give any comments as you listen to this video. And I introduce you, none other than Tanya, the author of Breaks for Chicks. Tanya, how are you? And welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you today, TJ.
Good. Tanya, for those people of us that don't know you, where are you from and who are you?
I am originally from Zimbabwe, born there, moved to South Africa when I was 11, and then been living in Johannesburg for most of my adult life. Relocated to the wilderness in December last year, so that's where you'll find me now. And been investing in property in South Africa since 2003 and in the UK since 2015.
So for some of you who don't know, the wilderness is not the wilderness as in the wilderness, but there's actually a place in South Africa that's called the wilderness. And Tanya, how I figured that out, I said to my wife the other day, Tanya has just moved into the wilderness and I'm not so sure where exactly in the wilderness. And my wife said, there is a place called the wilderness. I said, oh, really? But I'm sure you've been educated like I was as well. But Tanya, you've been in the property for a while. Mm-hmm. And it's now a business for you. But over and above that, you've also started doing something that's fascinating, which is educating other people via your journey. And you have now recently written a book. And I want us to dive into that book because I think that me and you, we both come from the Robert Kiyosaki thinking. And in one of his books, he talks about the students teaching the students, and that's how you end poverty. Mm. And if I look at what you've done here, which is now taking your entire experience from the time that you started in the early 2000s, up until now, and investing in different markets and making this a business, taking all of that and then you're putting in a book, and there is someone else who is like me starting off property today. I am literally gaining everything that you have done in a book and I can apply and start winning. But what is the book all about?
The book is titled Bricks for Chicks, and that was just a fun play really on so property investing for women who kick ass. That's the whole title. And it was really just a fun play on teaching people how to invest in property in South Africa. And then because I'm passionate about women empowerment and I have 2 daughters of my own, we thought that it would be great fun to just call it Bricks for Chicks. I've had a lot of men buy my book and send me reviews on it. So don't worry, men, you can read my book with ease too. And what I tried to do was share some of the stories and experiences of property investing in South Africa in a fun, accessible kind of way, because I find that business books can be very dry and very serious, and then nobody ever reads them. I looked at this situation and said, what if there was a way for us to bring across the key principles in a fun, informative way? So by the time you've finished reading the book, you've been entertained and educated. And that was my goal of getting out there and showing people how to invest in property in South Africa. And one of the things you mentioned was, why would I take all of my knowledge and put it in a book to just give it away to people, so to speak? And I think with property, once you've been in the property game for a while, you realize that everything changes all the time. There's always something new to learn in property, which is what I love about it. And there's always some different strategies that you can approach, some different learnings. And I think they all end up learning off each other. So it's certainly not like this is a definitive, this is absolutely everything I know and will ever know about property. It's more like a stake in the ground. At this point, this is what I know. And for sure, there would be future books, because this is an introduction to property investing. Somebody who has no clue about the terminology, about how to get started, about how to do any kind of research, just set up the groundwork so that you can get into the property market. And then, of course, there are so many different strategies and ways to go about it from there. And so I think it really was just an entry point into the market, a fun way to start engaging with people, and a fun way to start getting women to think about what are they doing about their financial futures for themselves and for their families. Because if you're in control of your own finances, you get to make the decisions about where you live, where you go and learn, where your children go to school. All of these decisions suddenly can become yours instead of having to rely on someone else as your ultimate breadwinner, which is one of the traditional things that we've seen in the past. I know that's shifted a lot lately, but I just want to move away from that and put the power firmly back in the hands of the women of South Africa.
Yeah, so both of us, we've lived in multiple countries in Southern Africa. And I'm sure you can agree with me that in most countries, and I think it even goes to across Africa, women are not in the driving seat in terms when it comes to property for them to stay in, and even later to do investments, right? But statistically of late in South Africa, there's been a huge spike. I think 2022, 2021, there was more women who've been buying properties, be it for investments or for just staying in on their own. And I think for me this becomes very important, because as many a times recently there was another article that I did a review on, and basically the husband thought of selling the property, and he's married in community of property, and he sold the property and assumed that he doesn't need to consult the wife. And they were in a court wrangle around it, and the husband died in the process. And eventually the judge said, look, this is in the High Court. And they said, look, the sale is the sale. It was done. Now, there's the woman, she's now left with kids. There's the woman, she is still carrying my name. And there's the woman, she probably now resent me to death at that time. But in your book, you're changing that mindset. Say, bricks for chicks, you can actually do it. I want us to speak to two things, Tanya. As an author, what were your stumbling blocks in actually putting your IP onto pen and paper and get it to be a book? Yeah, let's start with that one.
I think the very idea, I had the idea in my head for a long time that I wanted to write a book. But if you take that, write a book, it feels like such a huge, onerous task. How do you do that? You probably would have to go somewhere like the wilderness and lock yourself away for a year and sit and type furiously in order to be able to pull that off. So I think in the beginning, it was the fear of how do I actually get everything that I want to say on paper, and how do I make it all work? So I was my own stumbling block, really. The knowledge was there, the skill was there. How did I do it? And so what I did was I broke it down and said, right, I blog on a weekly basis. I blog about property. Just keep blogging about property every single week. And then at the end of a couple of years, you have all this content, which you can then filter through, add to, and adjust, categorize, flesh it out, get it all sorted out with your editorial team. And voila, you have a book. And I think that was, for me, the challenge, because I think we often say, oh, I want to do something, and then we want to do it immediately. The idea of having to work at something for a long time in order to be able to achieve it, that's not sexy. Nobody's interested in the long slog. But if you just break it down and say, okay, I'm going to do something on a weekly basis, you're improving your writing skills, you're seeing the kind of response you get from your readership base, and you are learning about how to get your story across in a more effective, more succinct way. And then at the end, you've got a whole lot of content that you can use in any which way, shape, or form you would like. And so for me being the stumbling block, and then in the end, me coming up with a strategy to overcome that stumbling block, and to just write about the different things, try and categorize it. You could sit down and say, right, if you're going to talk about property investing, there's basics, there's, the foundation, building the walls, putting on the roof, and then how do we protect all of that? If you look at it in those broad categories, then I could say, what areas am I going to be blogging in, so that by the time I arrive at the end of a couple of years, I've written something at least about all of those areas. And then I had to spend quite a bit of time still refining that, redesigning that, and making it all work. But that was the secret weapon, really, making sure that I had content to go back on. And I think that's a benefit of what you're doing now as well, creating content like this, podcast content, any content that you're creating out there. Think of it as being something that you could go back to in future, redesign, repurpose, and reuse. And that's the trick.
100%. My fellow authors or my fellow inspiring authors, there's a starting point. I did ask that question specifically for you. At that time, you can hit the like button because I've just given you something there for free. Tanya, the last 2 years, you're in business. You know, you're not someone who's starting off in this property game. You're in business. You've been at it for a while. But the last 2 years have been a rare case to be in business. Anyone who's in business would either testify to the point of, I made so much money or I lost so much money, right? There was no middle ground because the world just became a different world. What was your experience? And do you have any stumbling blocks that you experienced within these 2 years, or some wins, especially in the pandemic? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because pandemics don't stop. They come in different fashions. So I was around in the HIV pandemic, and I saw quite a lot of people, breadwinners, dying. And that was my first aha into, if I am to die, what do I need to do? Because with like early in my teens or late in my teens, a lot of my mates, their fathers or mothers, breadwinners basically, they went very early on, right? And I saw how life literally changed for a lot of them. And I look at them now and I'm like, had you still been in the same lifestyle that you had when your father was around, things were cool. But I also looked at some other families who had better plans for their families in terms of simple things. They had life covers, they had a different property somewhere else. When the breadwinner died, their lifestyle didn't change. And I look at some of those mates of mine and I start doing comparing of the two. And I say, these guys are still struggling, trying to get onto their feet even now that they're older. And these guys are ahead in life because they had a stepping stone. So this question here is very much around, what can we learn from pandemics? I don't know how many pandemics you've gone through, but I think this is our second one, you know? Yeah. And this one here, you were in business, so many, many lessons. I've been thinking about writing them actually, because there've been so many of them for me. But what has been your lessons and stumbling blocks during this pandemic?
I think it speaks to a number of things, what you've mentioned there. And I believe, yes, there's pandemics, there's also market crashes. There's always going to be something coming along that's going to affect the world. And I think if you go into business thinking it's a straight line, this is how it's always going to work, that's going to be your first stumbling block. What we have to do is just try as far as possible to set ourselves up for success. Prior to the pandemic even hitting, and prior to us getting started in investing in property, one of the main questions was, what vehicles are we going to put our properties into in order to protect our wealth for our children? And in order to protect our wealth, what happens if we die? We've set up trusts, we've set up companies, set up different ways of investing in the properties. And of course, make sure you consult your tax consultant, because they're always changing loopholes around trusts and the expenses around trusts. So don't rush out and just do that necessarily. I'm just saying that was our experience. And then having companies, etc. And then of course, some in personal names too. So the main thing for us was to make sure that we were setting it up to protect our children. That of course came in really handy when the pandemic hit, because there was a point when none of us were sure who was going to drop dead next. And there was a huge amount of fear around that. What happens if that does happen? Then there was a feeling of, okay, we can rest easy because we've set everything up for the children. It would all, everything's in place, everything is sorted out. And I became almost like a bit of a grim reaper in the beginning stages of the pandemic, getting everybody to go through something that's called a what if file. That is something that Nikki Bush developed when her husband died, not accidentally, was murdered unexpectedly. And it's an incredibly useful document for you to go through and make sure you've got everything lined up, because I think we need to be set up and understand that we're all going to die. If that's the truth, and it is, how am I setting myself up to make sure that I'm protecting my wealth and protecting my family? So for me, it was really just a honing of all of that during the pandemic to make sure that we were protected financially, protecting our family and our children. But then as a property investor, if we flip it around and say, how did I experience the pandemic as a property investor? Absolutely, we had issues with tenants defaulting, issues with those tenants that were defaulting weren't able to evict them because of all of the rules and restrictions and lockdowns, and tenants really struggling to be able to pay the rent, a long time of not being able to put up any kind of rent. There were a lot of things that were coming at us as property investors that would make the faint-hearted just say, this is not for me. I'm going to go and find another way of making money. But what I'd like to say to those people is you face risks in any kind of investment class that you're in. There's no bulletproof investment class. We've seen crypto do all kinds of crazy things lately. We've seen stocks and shares, companies crashing, companies excelling. And the same is true for the property market. You've got to be in property for a long-term type arrangement. This is not a quick fry in the pan, and when things get tough, you bail. It's you've got to buy the right property and hang on to it. If you're doing buy-to-let, the right property, hang on to it and ride out these tough times, and make sure that you're investing correctly. Make sure you've got a bit of a buffer to help you get through these kinds of things, because there's always an end to it. That's one thing that we can learn from pandemics and from market crashes. There's always an end to it. Yes, it starts, and when you're in the middle of the storm, it feels like it's never going to end. It feels so incredibly overwhelming, but it will turn around. And then where do you want to be when it turns around? Do you want to be still in the game and now taking advantage of the fact that you've got lots of people? Now the market's turned again. With all the interest rate hikes, people are very keen on renting. Now the rental market is booming. It's really easy to rent out properties. Sure, maybe still for a little bit lower than before, but people are interested in renting. So it's just understanding that the market does that all the time. Understand that you watch the market, see what's happening with your tenants, make sure you've got good letting agents on your side to advise you on what's going on. And of course, have some empathy with what's really going on out there. I think all of us were hit differently during the pandemic, and realizing that while we're dealing with property, we're also dealing with people. And we need to make sure that we're taking care of everybody around us as much as we can while putting ourselves first.
I like that. Tanya, I know that you're married and you've got 2 kids, both in their teens. I am passionate about couples driving goals together for the benefit of their families. And I see more and more couples who they're married, but their journeys are literally south and north pole, right? And many a times that then leads to a slow death into their relationship, and then someday they get divorced and they wonder what happened, or they just continue doing life, right? And later on, they run about 50, 60, they're trying to figure out, how do we retire? And time has been lost. Where is have they just figured out that they are on one team? And as one team, how best can we work together to save this team now that we now have, which is the kids, and potentially the generation to come? In your view, you've been married much longer than I've been, and you go kids. This idea of being on the same team and driving the same course as husband and wife was kind of like starts with you. If you've got any other benefits where you are coming from money, or whether you are coming from an inheritance, then yes, that's a stepping stone. But for me, I've seen lots of people in my generation, or even before, they're starting from ground zero. They have nothing. And how do they progress from there to start building what is theirs, to start building what is for the next generation? I'm not so much about legacy, because I'm like thinking, how do you build legacy when you can't even feed your own self? So my question to you, Tanya, is what are the, let's say if you had to give, I'm married, yes, but if someone else who's like kind of like married now, and they're reading the book, Bricks for Chicks, and now they're thinking, I've got this guy that I'm married to. and potentially they're now married in a community of property. And that guy is like me 10 years ago, and I know nothing about property. So all I'm seeing is the risk and risk and risk and nothing else, yes. Right? What has worked for you to become one team, to start building a business, and to drive your goals, whatever goals that you have had? But what are the fundamentals of actually just being able to work together? I look at my wife and I, we work together, but not all the time, right? And we go off the rails sometimes, but we come there because we've got specific goals that we're trying to get to. What has worked for you within the years of you getting married?
I think you've raised a couple of interesting points there, and I really believe it's true. If you, as a couple, have completely divergent goals, it's really hard to find the common ground after a while, particularly when kids are in the mix, because kids come along and they're all consuming. You might wake up one day and look at this complete stranger sitting across the table, staring at you and realizing that that's your partner. And I think having some kind of common goal certainly keeps bringing you back towards each other, and having the common goal of looking after the children. In terms of how do you manage getting out there and investing in property, of course, we all have different risk profiles. My husband is much more aggressive with his risk kind of profile. He would go out, when we were married very, very early on, he came home and just announced that he had bought a hotel in London. And I, of course, was mortified. How had he not spoken to me about it? What was going on? He'd been a bachelor for many, many years, so he didn't think he needed to talk to me about it. And I think even if you have a common goal of building up wealth together, there's going to be times when you're going to clash heads. You're going to need to determine the rules of engagement, see how you're going to work together as business partners, because this is now going to be quite a different look and feel to what your relationship was. Having the common end goal in sight always. This is going to be something that's going to protect our children's future. But let's be serious. We're also doing this to make sure that we can live a lovely life now too. So it's got to be that two-prong approach, because if we're constantly doing something for future generations and not feeling any benefit ourselves, it's going to become tired, and we're going to say, let's rather focus on something else. So making sure that you've got those short, medium, and long-term goals, and making sure that we sit down together every Monday night and have a look at our property portfolio, what's working, what's not working, what needs to happen, what doesn't need to happen. And those meetings aren't always fun, and they don't always go well, just like it would be with any business partner. There would be expenses, there would be forgotten maintenance, there would be forgotten payments, there would be issues that would come up. And then, of course, sometimes it goes really well. But I think the importance of having some kind of a consistency to it, because you need to be keeping your eye on the ball, and you need to be reminding each other of what's going on. And so the consistency is important. And then I think the consistency of reminding each other why this matters, how you support each other, and how to keep it going together. Those are the parts that are really important when you're trying to do property investing with somebody as a partner.
I like that. Thank you for that. Tanya, you wrote the book Bricks for Chicks, and I think that you have had enough life experience to have written anything else, right? You could have written about sex. You could have written about being a mommy. You could have written about migrating into different countries or traveling and all of those things. But you chose to write about property investment. And the question there is, number one, why? And in this book here that you've written, who is it for? And where can they get the book?
I was traveling around the country training for Robert Kiyosaki on property investing. And I would see when I was out there training that women would be a little bit anxious when I would get around to talking about the figures and talking about the numbers when it came to property investing. I'm talking very general here. Of course, this wasn't every single person. And that really bothered me, because I know that property is all about the numbers. And I hated maths at school. Hated maths and accountancy. Anything to do with numbers I was not a fan. But as soon as I realized that once you understand how to look at numbers on a property, the property will actually speak to you and tell you whether you should buy it, whether it shouldn't buy it. And once I knew that knowledge, I thought everybody out there has to know this. There is a trick to this property investing. Don't just go and buy things off a glossy brochure. Don't just go and buy something that an estate agent is trying to tell you. Make sure that you understand how to look at all of this and that you understand how to take care of yourself. So I was really disturbed by the fact that a lot of these women would lose interest or just pass it over to their partner. And I thought, no, there's got to be a way to get this information across. And then that was how the whole book came around. And of course, I've got the knowledge. Why not share it? And I have 2 daughters. And I don't know about you, but I often think about, if I were to die today, what would I have left behind for my children? And writing a book, of course, is a great way to be able to leave some kind of a legacy, some kind of an insight as to how you thought, how you processed the world, and how you moved through the world. And so that was another one of my driving factors, was to just make sure that I am getting out there and helping as many people as I possibly can with the knowledge that I have, because there's more than enough to go around. We have to believe in an abundant mindset. And it's not like by me sharing the knowledge, it's not like it makes the pie any less for me. In fact, it makes it better for all of us, because people are out there making smarter decisions and making the market grow in a smarter way. And so I was really determined to get out there and share the message and to start getting women having these discussions around, what am I doing about my investing? Have I made the right decisions? Because time goes by so quickly. You know, you start out in your 20s at varsity or younger at varsity. Before you know it, you're in a job and you blink and you're in your 40s, and then you're going, wait a minute, what have I done? So what if I could get to those people when they're really young in a fun, engaging way, to those women, and get them thinking about how are they going to set themselves up so that they are wealthy when they're older, that they can look after themselves and look after their children. So for me, while there's many other topics that I could write on and no doubt will write on at some point, I just am really determined to get out there and spread financial education, because I think financial wellness, once you've got that lined up, then the rest of your life can fall into place around that. And it gives you the means to live, to chase your dreams. We would never be able to be living here in the wilderness if my husband and I hadn't created a property portfolio, a portfolio in the UK, if we didn't have the spare funds available to help us buy this property, renovate it to how we want it to look like, and afford to send us kids to a private school while we're down here too. So I think it's, you know, you got to look at the different kinds of advantages that this kind of planning can give you. And then if I'm getting that mindset out there into younger generations, well, then I feel like my work here would be done.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, you can grab Tanya's book. Right in the description, you will get a link that takes us to the shop, and the books will be delivered to your doorstep right there where you at. And ladies and gentlemen, if this information is helpful and you've got any questions for us, Tanya, in the conversation that we have, in the comments, you are allowed to type in your comment, ask a question. And if something is totally just going over your head, ask the question. That's what this channel is here for, to educate you. And if it's been helpful, hey, hit the subscription button. Tanya, you've been in business. You've kept being in business. You're still going at it. You've been a mom. Your kids are in their teen years. And you're still a husband, you're still a wife, right, to your husband. All of these has their own dynamics, and you're still probably a friend to 1 or 2 other people. And you are still maybe a sister, a brother to someone else, and you're still a daughter to your parents. How do you navigate all of this with the 12 hours in a day that we've got? And still be able to make it work with the time that you have? Because a lot of people, they're like, I don't have the time.
Exactly. And it's very easy to not have the time, because there's so many, we live in a world of constant distractions. You can pick up your phone to check your messages and find yourself 20 minutes later mindlessly scrolling through social media, or of course be sucked into the latest series on Netflix to binge watch. So I think what really works for me is to be able to prioritize certain things and set yourself up in clever ways. I enjoy running and I enjoy being with my girlfriends. And so I have a running group and I go running with my girlfriends 3 times a week, and that allows me to catch up with them. Of course, I have to establish a new group down here in the wilderness, but it allows you to reach a couple of your goals. It allows you to stay fit. It allows you to keep in touch with your friends. And then in terms of the children, I really put my children way ahead of most other things in my life. So I make sure that I go and fetch them from school, spend the time together driving with them, make sure that there's always time to be together with them, or set up times over the weekends that we can be together with friends and family and them. And I think you need to look at your priorities in life and then see what can be put away, because there's so much time that gets wasted with menial tasks or with tasks that you really don't have to be doing. If you sit down and put some structure and put some habits in place that will support your goals, then it all becomes easy to manage. And I'm not saying that I get it right all the time. Of course not. We're going through a difficult time now where we're trying to renovate the property, and perhaps haven't been paying attention to my friends back in Joburg as much as I should have been, or to my parents who are still in Joburg while we wait to get them to come down here. So it's always going to be a bit of a seesaw. But I think in general, you need to set up some habits that are going to support you going forward, and then understand that there will always be patches where it's a little bit stormy and things are out of whack, but you get back on track again. And I think it's not to give up when you're going through the stormy patches. It's to understand that this is how it is, to make everybody aware that you need a bit of space while you figure it out, and then you're back in the game again. I think it's just accepting that we're human, setting up the best possible path, and then seeing how you go along that path.
Yeah. Okay. In the book, Bricks for Chicks, and yes, we may label to say that, you know, we've written the books in a more fun way and things like that, but it's an educational book on how to study now, and I want to hang on to that and to say, for anyone, be it your male or female, the book is there to educate you. I want to ask you, Tanya, of maybe two advices. Of late, I've been seeing a lot of people that club together, be it women or males. But I see it more with women, though, right? So they all club up together. They are all contributing 5,000, 5,000, or whatever it is. And the clubbing has different terminologies across Africa. But basically, it's crowdfunding, right?
Yes.
And when they club up together, they have the idea of doing property someday, right? And what are the two advices that you can give those that are starting a club or those that are being invited to a club on how they can start the club and to make it great? You know, because there's so many things that could go wrong, but there's also so many things that could go great.
Exactly.
So what is the advice that you can give, you know, people that club each other? Because this is almost now several husbands and several wives coming together.
Yes, pooling resources. And I think it's so creative. It speaks to the creativity of South Africans. You're not able to afford to go out there and buy a property on your own. But what if we all stood together? Maybe we could do it then. And I think that that's what's always so interesting, the many different ways that there are to approach a goal. I think that the first thing I would warn against is make sure that you're not getting yourself into some kind of a scam. There are so many scams out there at the moment, and with the way the economy is going, people are more and more desperate and coming up with more creative, fancy ways to get their hands on your money. So once you've reassured yourself that it's not a scam, it's with people that you trust, it's with people that you've got a long history with, I would make sure that it's all of those things. And then I would say that if you're going out there to buy property together, make sure you're buying a property to flip together. I would never advise people to buy a property to hold together, because what's going to happen is we buy a property now, we buy a little 2-bedroom flat in Sandton, and it's fantastic, and we're getting a good monthly rental income every month. And then a couple of years down the line, I decide that I'm leaving the country and want to go explore, and I want my capital back from that investment. And you say to me, no, Wes, I'm hanging on to that property. I need that monthly amount every month to help cover my kids' education, to help cover my fuel bill. And then what happens? Who wins in that equation? And so I would say that go into property with other people by all means, but make sure that you're just flipping it. In other words, you're buying a property, fixing it up, selling it, and splitting the profits. If you keep doing that, you end up growing your own pot to such a point that you one day would be able to buy your own property and then hold on to your own property. Because in my book, I say that I wouldn't buy a property to hold with anyone other than my husband, because you just don't know where your dreams and hopes are going to take you. And you don't want to end up in a position where it can destroy a friendship. And we've seen families and friendships get destroyed very easily when it comes to finances. So protect yourself from that and protect yourself from all the scamsters out there. But don't let I mean, that all sounds quite doom and gloom. There are still ways to get out there. It's a good way to get your feet wet. It's a good way to understand how things are going. Make sure that if you do get into a club like that, that other people in the club understand how property works, understand where it's going. It's not enough for a group of people to just get together and say, hey, we're going to save 5,000 Rand a month until we've got $1 million, and then we're going to buy a property. What is the exact strategy? Where are you looking? Where are you going with it? How is it going to work in the end? And I think once you've got all of that in place, then by all means go for it, because any step you can take towards improving your financial future is a step well worth taking.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was from Auntie Tanya giving you that advice there. But Uncle TJ is going to give you his. So I've got two that I want to give. And I think my two, I'm going to simplify it. If you're going to club, in your club, make sure that there is at least one person who is educated about the property or the business that you're wanting to do, right? Because many people come together, they want to club on something, but nobody actually knows nothing about whatever that they're trying to get into. So number one, someone needs to be educated, and they need to pull each other into this education, and that someone is dedicated 100%. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I want to jump into is that isn't when we are going into business, it's exactly like getting married, right? We all know that there is marriage contracts. There is how you're going to get into the marriage, and it's predefined on how you're going to exit. Simple, right? Community of property, we all know, you come in it, everybody owns everything. And when you are divorcing, what happens? Everybody gets a fair share. It's the simple contract. So as and when you are clubbing together, you are putting in your money. So that's your entry. What does it mean for my money to come in here? What are my responsibilities? Because like Tanya here, she's married. She was never going to expect her husband to give birth. She is the mommy in the relationship, right? So as and when you come in into these clubbings, so the number one thing is, what is your responsibility? As and when, is it just to put the money and you chill, armchair investor, or is there an expectation for you to do something? When you are now done in your head, not in the club, because the club might still like you, but when you are done, what is the exit criteria? If it is on black and white, right, and it's predefined, then it's a good club to jump into, because you know how to get in and you know how to get out. That was from Uncle TJ. I'm going to pause it there, and Tanya, I'm going to come back to you. You've been in business for a while, and I think if I look at you personally from a distance, it has always been the age. I see you getting educated all the time. But I think a lot of us, we come into business and the money starts coming in and we stop the education piece. In your view, like, how should you be continuously improving yourself as you go along to hone your skill or to sharpen it further? Because you did say that earlier on, property is always changing. So what have you done in this last couple of years, we can just say maybe 20 years or so, that has made you to stay ahead in terms of improving Tanya?
I'm a strong believer in continuous professional development. I think you never stop learning. And I think that's one of the great disservices we do to our children, to have them believe that they go to school, go to university, and then throw away the books and you never have to look at another thing again. I think that is that's a shocking belief to have and should be thrown out the window immediately. There are so many ways for us to be able to educate ourselves. There's fantastic courses out there. There are so many thought leaders out there that you can follow now on social media. So my social media feed would be filled with people who are uplifting, inspiring, or talk about the things that I'm interested in. I use Audible all the time, which turns my car into a university. And when you're driving around anywhere, you can listen to Audible, you can You can listen to Audible with headphones and your cell phone when you're walking around the house doing your chores or doing whatever needs to happen. There's so many ways that you can get out there and educate yourself. Now we can go back to attending courses in person. Get out there. There's so many things that you can learn about. I'm fascinated by things that we can learn about. And I think being endlessly curious is one of the best skills to have, because that really is the way to stay abreast with what's happening. The world is an amazing place. You know, if we stop being curious, if we stop wondering about how things work, about how you can improve yourself, about how you can improve your finances, then you just start to stagnate and go backwards. And then life can become really quite dull. It's just this boring routine. So push yourself, challenge yourself, learn something new. There's so many amazing books out there. There's so many amazing people out there who are willing to share their knowledge. So take advantage of that, get into their heads and get it to change the way that you look at things. Find people that you can talk to that challenge you instead of sitting around discussing, you know, the latest scandal on the block. What about discussing the latest monetary trends? Or what about, that might sound dreadfully boring, but what about discussing something really that's going to get you stopping and going, wow, I never thought about that, you know? And I think that's what's fantastic. Surround yourself with people who think differently, who ask questions that really get you thinking. And then I think it's a great way to keep yourself curious and engaged with the world.
Tanya, what's your favorite business book?
You know, I don't read a lot of business books, hilariously enough. What I do read is a lot of self-help books, a lot of motivational books. And there's two books really that stick out for me. The first one is The Slight Edge. Absolutely love that book. And it talks about the benefit of doing small little things every day to get you where you want to be going. And I think that's really the only way that we can get anywhere. Again, it speaks to the sexiness of trying to do everything all at once. But what about if you were just taking small steps? So that book is by Jeff Olson, one of the greatest for sure, The Slight Edge. And there's a Slight Edge for teens as well, which is also fantastic and great to start educating our children into that way of thinking. And then now my current favorite is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he also has a fantastic weekly blog that he sends out. And the Atomic Habits is, what are the small little habits that you can set up in your life that make sure that you end up reaching your goals, whether it's fitness, whether it's wealth, whether it's a happy relationship, whatever it may be. And he's always throwing out these fascinating questions that have me sitting going, wow, I hadn't thought of that before. So if you don't have that circle of friends that can challenge you to think, get out there. There's plenty of people that you can engage with who will get you thinking differently. And just and start following podcasts like this podcast, for example, amazing one. You know, you meet interesting guests and you can start following them. There's many ways that you can find the right teacher for you. The point is to just get out there and get engaged with the world because it's waiting for you.
If we had to look back 30 years from today, what kind of advice would you give your younger self with what you know today?
I think to just have faith that you really are being guided along your path, because I think there's so much angst as you're growing up. What should I do? Is it going to be the right choice? You know, where is life going to take me? And I think we put so much pressure on our children to have it all figured out by the time you're 18 and have left school. And I've seen that now with my nephews heading off to university. You know, what are you studying? It's going to cost a lot to study it. Are you sure that's the thing you want to be studying? And I'm saying, just study something that you're interested in. If you chase something that you're interested in, you're always on the right path. And I wish I could go back and tell my younger self that too. Instead of being so caught up in getting it right, whatever right was, following some kind of strange societal doctrine, which I think has been blown out of the water with COVID and how that made us challenge all kinds of belief systems. Just go inside and trust what makes you happy. Follow the path that interests you. Follow the path that lights you up. And then you'll never be on the wrong path. And I think just to relax and trust that you are being divinely protected and guided along your path, I think that would take so much angst out of the equation if we could just learn to trust ourselves and just have fun. You know, life flashes by in an instant. And if you're not having fun along the way, you're going to arrive at the end of it and just think, oh, all I did was grind myself to the bone trying to fit into someone else's dream. What about if I had fitted into my dream? Then you can lie there happily one day and say, that was a great ride.
Amazing. I ask every guest that we host here, I always ask them this question. And it's fascinating the amount of the difference in which that they answer the question. And I'm going to ask you, but probably you know it because I've asked you the same question before. And let me see, maybe things have changed in your world. What does success look like to you?
Yeah. So success for me has definitely changed over the years. And I think that's a beautiful thing to accept for all of us. I think we can set ourselves goals, we can set ourselves statements, we can set ourselves personal, mementos, and accept that it's going to change as you go along in time. Certainly before I had children, what success looked like is very different to what success looks like to me now. So for now, for success for me is if my family knows how much I love and support them and how perfect they are and how much an important part of my life they are. That's success. Being able to do what I want to do with who I want to do it with, when I want to do it, that's success. Having the freedom to go out there and be able to do things that I want to do, that would interest me, that live where I want to live, be with the people I want to be with. That's success. So it comes down to not a number in the bank account. It's never that. It's always, what would that number in the bank account enable you to live? What kind of lifestyle would that enable you to live? What do you want your life to look like? And I think for me, how I want my life to look like now, living in the wilderness, a lot calmer, a lot more connected, a lot more adventurous, that's success to me, being able to go out there and try that lifestyle.
Tanya, it's been great having you around, and to all the success to you, and be fruitful in all of your adventures, and enjoy the wilderness, and we'll chat with you soon. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Tanya. And if this was informative, like I did say before, hit us the like button, write in the descriptions. We'll also add in Tanya's credentials in there. And if you wanting to check her out on what she does. And who knows, the world might become a better place and a smaller place, because we all know each other. Until we meet again, we'll see you on the next video.